Great. Welcome everyone to Academic Half Day. We're so excited to have you all here. We are super excited for this session this morning. We have Dr. Barbara Jung, our Chair of Medicine here, and we are all going to be discussing the video Picture a Scientist, which I hope most of you found some time to watch parts of and enjoyed. I personally really enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to talking about it. Dr. Jung, if you'd like to say hello, and then after that I can introduce kind of how the morning will go, if that sounds good.
Yes. So this is the highlight of my day. I was really excited to have this session. I can't wait to hear reactions. It is quite the movie. I will say I watched it with my 14-year-old daughter, and I know a lot of people have watched it with family. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to a robust discussion and some ideas that will surely emerge from seeing this together. So thank you for being open to it. Thank you for watching it. I'm really excited to also see, to see people of all genders on this call, because this is not limited to females. Of course, this affects all of us. And again, welcome, good morning, and I look forward to a great discussion.
Great, thank you so much. So to start everyone thinking and talking, we are going to start the room with some brief breakout rooms. And Dr. Cho has some questions prepared, and I think he'll share his screen now to show them. And then following the breakout rooms, we will come back and ask for just a very brief kind of summary of what the groups talked about. And then we'll spend the rest of the time kind of with open forum and questions and discussion.
Fantastic. Can everyone see my Word document here? Just give me a thumbs up if you can. Fantastic. Like Dr. Jung, I watched this with my daughter, and it really generated a lot of discussion because she's 11 and wants to be a culinary chemist when she grows up. And so we had a conversation of what it meant to be a scientist and everything that she would face. And so I was inspired and disturbed and all sorts of emotions in watching the film. In any case, to get the conversation going, we're going to divide you into breakout groups of about 8-ish or so. And these are two of the questions that I'm hoping that your group can discuss. Feel free to discuss anything that you would like to in these breakout rooms. What I would ask is that someone within the group afterwards be ready to share if there are things that feel comfortable to share with the larger group, to be representative and try to represent some of the surprising findings or surprising discussion or the predominant conversation or even some outlier conversation that happens as part of your breakout rooms. So the two questions I'd like you to consider, the first is this: the film shares a description of sexual harassment as an iceberg, with sometimes only the most egregious overt events that are publicly visible on top. Underneath, the vast majority of sexual harassment consists of subtle slights and microaggressions. Have you ever experienced or been witness to such activities like subtle exclusion, inappropriate questions about competence, told to change your appearance, or not being invited to meetings where you're the expert? How did this make you feel? And what did you do to combat this feeling? And I also want to make clear that this also applies if you have witnessed this in others as well, not just to yourself. The second question, and Lauren, perhaps you can put these in the chat so that people can view them. The second, or sorry, I'll do that because I have the document. The second question is, in the film, one of the scientists talked about code switching, changing your speech and mannerisms depending on the cultural and social context, such as between workplace and private lives, for example. Have you ever felt internal or external pressure to code switch based on concerns over your perceived stereotypes? What are some of the ways in which you've had to code switch in your own life? So think about these two questions, and we'll give you 15 minutes. And then when you come back, we hope that some of you are comfortable to share some of the conversation. Hi. I actually realized I need to put in the, I don't know if Lauren put in the questions, but I need to put in the questions into the.
She did put them in there.
Oh, she did. Okay, fantastic. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Let's get her a breakout room.
Vel, I think I was in room 8. Would you mind putting me back in there?
Let's see. It says not joined. When you hover over breakout rooms, do you see anything that would take you to it?
Oh yeah, never mind. Never mind, I can do that.
Cool.
Holy moly. I don't know if your groups were like ours, but we had so much to say and so much to talk about. Not to put anyone on the spot, but I don't know if anyone from any of the groups feels comfortable sharing some of the conversation and sharing some of what was discussed with the larger group. Totally okay if not, but if someone is willing to, I'd like to give you that chance.
I can share what our group talked about.
Thank you, Nina.
I'm Nina, for those of you I haven't met yet. We had a great discussion. I'm sure all of our groups did. Some of our group members shared parents' struggles, moms' struggles with careers in science and medicine, and talked about, how in this documentary, they even used data to show that this was an issue, and yet it was still sort of not necessarily accepted in a scientific world, and how difficult that is. One thing that we talked about was sort of like all of our roles in this problem and any issue of bias or prejudice, where it can be difficult to sort of accept or internalize, the incongruency between who you think you are and who you want to be, and like what your actions or like what you do portrays you as or identifies you as, and that can sometimes, it can be difficult to have like reflective conversations with peers or with whoever, because it first, you're breaking through that layer of feeling like you're not that person, or you don't identify as part of the problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nina.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else like to share their group's discussion?
I am the designated reporter for my group. We talked about sort of initially talking about sort of folks sharing their experiences of being a woman in medicine or knowing folks who are women in medicine, and these sort of both explicit and implicit assumptions that you are not a doctor or that you don't have the level of training that you have, which I think are pretty common experiences. But folks talked a lot about the way that ends up being internalized, thinking about sort of that code switching and the way that you change how you dress or how you talk to look more professional, hoping that people will be more inclined to see you as your role. And then we talked some about sort of gender-based differences in the ways that like attendings or faculty are treated by trainees, and how that's something that there's maybe not a great way to address right now. And sort of talked some about like who the onus is on to address that, if some of the onus is maybe on male colleagues of women who experience this, and like that there's not a great way to move that up the chain right now.
Kayla, are you able to share in a de-identified way some of those examples of ways in which attendings acted differently?
Sure. So I mean, someone shared thinking about like being a hospitalist and holding a triage pager and the very different degrees of pushback and very different degrees of appropriateness of interactions that those attendings experience from trainees when they're triaging and from other colleagues when they're triaging, as sort of an example.
Thank you.
I'm happy to share a little bit from our group as well. We focused on, I'm Sally, for those of you who don't know me. We focused on discussing quite a bit about the sort of bottom portion of the iceberg analogy, and how both in the scientific fields and in the medical profession, some of those subtle interactions with people, whether they be from from fellow scientists or from even as much as in evaluations, commenting on the way someone dresses as a professional kind of way to measure someone's professionalism might be veiled in a compliment, but really why? Comment on that. And then kind of how we feel that we're lucky in our field or fortunate in our field of internal medicine that there is a really large proportion of women, and our other colleagues might not be so. So things could potentially be a little bit easier for us, but in other fields that may not be the case. But then recognizing that as we move towards promotion and becoming further along in our fields, that attrition rate with people being promoted, faculty getting tenure, and how we have the kind of the responsibility, whether we identify as male or female, to continue to promote diversity and inclusiveness to help eliminate some of that attrition as we experience in our careers.
Thank you, Sally. I want to give us time for Dr. Jung to have open forum and conversation about this. I will share, if my group is okay with sharing, the idea that there is this feeling of constantly having a double hit of experiencing a microaggression and feeling like the worry and the tension of like that person has to be responsible for responding to it and how burdensome that was, and this constant feeling of exhaustion and feeling like, is it worth it to say something, or do I just let it slide, and how tiring that was for a lot of people experiencing. And so it wasn't just the initial hit, it was sort of the constant gnawing of it afterwards that was really tiresome for a lot of people. I'm gonna ask Dr. Jung to jump in and perhaps ask any questions or share any conversations that she'd like to have.
Thank you. So we had a great group. I think just, as I highlighted, I think this is an all gender discussion. And I think it's so important to have everyone at the table to discuss this. I really try to listen on this, and I could listen, for much longer. Of course, I have a lot to say from all the different vantage points. One is, what can we do about it? How did this come to be? What are the reactions to it? How is the current state? I will start because this is how we ended our group. There was actually a request of like, can you share your experience? Because we're at the beginning of our training, and it would be really interesting to us to hear what you have experienced. And I'm very happy to do that. I didn't share it in the group because I wanted to share it with everyone. And so I've had a variety of experiences like everyone. I think one thing that came up in our group, which fully resonated with me, is that I've had some really bad experiences with senior women. I mean, really horrific, actually. And I think it's very important when we look at the path forward that we don't make assumptions based on gender. So just because somebody is a woman, they may not be more empathetic and nurturing to women. In fact, sometimes it could be the other way around. And this is actually something I really try to hold myself accountable. We talked about bias also, and how bias is just so inherent, and we all have biases. but I really, really try to look hard at how I treat women, because that's one thing I don't want to be. I've had negative role models that way, and it's really important for me to be a positive role model for women. I will say that I experience microaggressions every day. I would say that when I interviewed at UW, I think UW has a long way to go there. It was very clear to me from the beginning that there's work to be done. It's clear in the Learning Environment Steering Committee, which there were LCME, which is the medical student accreditation body, issues with, you know, some was racism, some is sexism, which happened at every medical school. But the gender stuff was a little higher here than other places. And some people were surprised. And I said, I'm not, from what I'm experiencing and seeing every day. I obviously chose to come here. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but it's alive and well. And I think the onus is on us as a department to really create that environment and be active about it. When I saw the movie, I said, we really want to make this publicly available so we can start these discussions. I've started, and I thought about how to call this, Gender Equity Council. And I think some of you are on it because we have resident representation. It was the one email to a call of action where we got the most responses. And I actually even thought about sending it because, you know, it's COVID, there's so much going on. We were working so hard on racial justice and, you know, there's all these things. And the one thing is also, I don't want to keep burdening people with more work. So one question I had is when we did this with faculty, I said, do we want to do work around this, or do we just need to sit back for a little bit and just, you know, do self-care until we're ready? And the overwhelming feeling was, no, we want to work on this. So we're going to work on this, which, you know, it's very near and dear to me. If you have been to my office, if not, I welcome you all to come visit in a socially distanced way. You'll see the hallway in front of where, who of you, can I see a show of hands who's been to that hallway where my office is on the 5th floor? Yes, okay. If you haven't, go there. It's quite something. Those of you who have been, do you want to share how it looks like?
Portraits of white dudes on the walls.
Yes. There's a whole, and not very friendly looking if you ask me. So my first question would be, what am I doing here? And I will tell you that I think that for a subset of this department, the fact that I was chosen to be the chair was kind of a disappointment because I don't look like what they expected. I don't talk like what they expected. I don't come from the same background. I will also say it gives me a lot of hope about UW that they did choose me because they obviously wanted something really different, and something really different they got. So I think that's where we're at, you know, and when I get some of these, I go like, you know what, I feel you, I understand this is very difficult for you, and I really do, but here we are, and how are we gonna work through this? I will share an example of, I don't know, you guys can decide if it's microaggression or what this is, but you can see here behind me, this is my office, and so this is how it looks like. You know, I have some pictures of my children there, little couch where you can sit, because many of the meetings in here, you know, are still, it's not the most fun to go to the chair's office. It's not always easy conversation. When I came here, it was dark furniture, leather, boardroom style. The furniture was from a faculty named Fialco, who was the dean before Paul Ramsey. So I think from the 50s or something, and it was so clearly not me. I was like, you know what? Let's just change it, make it more open. I want people to be able to breathe in here and not feel uncomfortable. So I changed it. And so this is the reactions I got. So a lot of people are like, wow, this is nice. You know, it feels open, it feels warm. I got at least 3 or 4 male faculty leaders who walked in, they're like, oh, whoa, different. I said, yeah, it's different. They said, well, this makes me feel really uncomfortable. I said, okay. I said, I'm sorry, like this makes you uncomfortable. And then I tried to turn it around and I said, okay, so if my office, the way it is now, which is my office, makes you feel uncomfortable, the half hour you're in here a month, how do you think I felt in the office that you like? And I think this was brought up in one of the report backs from the groups. I think some of these conversations, which of course I realize are very hard to have uphill, but I try to have them. We need to create some awareness and some insight into, so I just tried, I don't even know if I got anywhere, but I'm like, okay, I get it. You don't like this. I mean, it's not even pink and purple and all this stuff, but whatever it is, you really don't like it. It's fine. You don't have to. It's my office. But think about, if you don't like this, did I like the other thing? And of course, that never, I think, entered anyone's mind. Can I change my office the way I want it? I mean, I think there's just so many interesting things to start. The other thing I will say, which I think is more than microaggression, is that one person said, wow, you have a sofa in here. Like, yeah, I could never get away with that. I'm like, you know, I said, the sofa is not the problem. And I said, I don't even know where your mind's going, because I've had sofas all my career. I've never had an issue thinking about what it means to have a sofa in your office. So I think there's a lot of richness in starting to have these discussions. But it's alive and well. I will share one more thing and then stop, because I think there's a lot of reactions. When I interviewed, I was a more complicated recruit because I have a husband who also works, who also has a career. And I made it very clear that we're either going to be here September of 2019 or the next September, because I have 2 kids and they're in school and I'm the mom, and they're not going to stay in Chicago, and I'm not going to be away from my husband. We're not going to do any of this, well, you start and then everybody else comes and all this other stuff. And I said, I realized, and I said that very early on, I said, I just, you know, timeline. It's very important to me that we all move at the same time and that my husband can move with me, that we move as a family. And they did it, but it was kind of unusual. So I've always sort of, on the things that feel non-negotiable to me, I've stuck to my guns and I've been clear about it. And I said, this is, you know, other things were less important to me. That is very important. And I will not do it otherwise. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this job without having my husband here, or my kids are somewhere else. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm a mom. But I think this was brought up in our group discussion also. It's still very much the case that these things don't factor in on a daily basis because there's a lot of negative consequences to really being transparent on how your day looks like. I will end with saying that we had an idea. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but we had an idea. I want, you know, maybe I was thinking of maybe doing a video of what I do all day long, from the moment I get up to at night, and all the different roles, you know, in between. The other day, there was a COVID case in my son's class, so he had to be picked up. So I have to do the whatever while I'm doing the Zoom and while I'm talking to. So there's all this stuff, all these roles, all the code switching that goes all day long, that is not always visible to all parties, because that's really not what we still can share openly. So I will stop here because I know this was a lot, but that's been my experience. I'm hopeful. I think we just need critical mass, men and women, and be thoughtful, have each other's backs, speak up when things happen, and create that environment. And I know we will. I know it's already improved, but we have ways to go. So I'm going to stop at that. And I know the chat is, yeah, Ken has a sofa, I know, is starting, and I'm going to stop and see for reactions.
I think there's a lot of positivity about the idea of doing the day in the life. I think that a lot of people would love that.
Careful what you wish for. It is very abundant, as my yoga teacher would say. There's a lot of abundancy, but I feel very, very lucky to have all these people in my life. And non-binary, yes.
I know it can be intimidating to speak in front of a large group. Feel free to throw things in the chat. This is your chance to have our chair of our department for another 11 minutes. So
Nothing's off limits, please, you guys. And you know, I will tell you that I'm hoping I want to do a fireside chat where we can talk about all kinds of stuff, just sort of, you know, informal. I've been talking to Ken about it. I know there's a lot going on. I really miss connecting with you. I've been trying to find ways to better connect. We're so limited with the Zoom. I used to be able to go to luncheons and do stuff. And so I want to do a fireside chat where we can talk about everything and anything. But I do want to make myself, you know, fully available to all of you, especially as we're going through these really unprecedented times. So nothing's off limits. That's what I'm trying to say.
I wanted to just make a comment. Hi, I'm Alice.
I want to know who this is.
This is Elke Luise.
Oh, cute.
6 Monate alt.
Hallo, Elke.
And I just want to say that we've had a little bit of a change in our whole program that I think is a big step forward. So, uh-oh, now I can't see you, but I'll just keep talking. So as you can tell, I have a baby and I'm pumping, and so is another one of our co-residents. And we have a really great lactation policy in our program, just speaking of supporting lactating residents. But for the Harborview cardiology rotation, there wasn't a way to basically put this policy into effect. And so thanks to one of our co-residents thanks to one of our co-residents, basically we've been working with Ken and we've been working with the chiefs, and we've come up with a solution to ensure basically that we'll be able to keep pumping. And so I just want to say that I think that is a part of that's really challenging, being someone who's lactating as a resident. And you know, we can be creative and come up with solutions, and that happened recently. So that's really an exciting, I think, step forward.
Thank you, Elise, for sharing, and congratulations. She looks very mellow.
I think to piggyback off that, I will just give a shout out to Brandon and the other people in the union that have been fighting for women, especially with the new not having to take 28-hour call. You know, that was something that I think it has to become a culture thing. And a lot of times people would just push through and keep doing it. I did. And so I think big shout out to Brandon and the rest of the people that are involved with the union. I think you guys did so much for us. It's just amazing to have that now be the expectation and not the exception. And I think that just makes it easier for like women to take care of themselves when they're pregnant.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Sarah. I'm currently 36 weeks pregnant. And so it's been such a, I guess, wonderful experience to know that there are people that really care and that there have been really tangible things that have been put in place, both for during my pregnancy and then afterwards, like with all the lactation things that Alice mentioned. So thank you so much.
I have a question. This is a little bit shifting gears, but yay, pregnant moms. Is there a place where we can find the data on the University of Washington's like policy, or like comparison between men and women in salaries and promotion percentages and percentage that get tenure? So So that's one of my questions. And then the other is there an easy place to find where there are women in medicine groups that meet? I know that we have a lot of great people in our program and a lot of female leadership, but I'd love to kind of get to know women from across the scientific fields at the University of Washington who are not just in my field.
Yeah, there is and I think COVID put a halt to it, but there's a symposium on women in medicine that, they have a couple of leaders speak, and I think there's some networking going on around that. I just started the council with specifically looking at data. I can tell you that there's every 3 years department-wide salary review that actually the dean's office initiates. So Trish Critic and I and all the administrators went through every person's salary, and there are a lot of inconsistencies, but they're not gender specific. So I can tell you that in a big nutshell in terms of, yes, there's a lot of inconsistencies. A lot has to do with how you can increase salaries here and how you can adjust them and how they came about. So it's very complicated, and we only have so many levers. I can't, for instance, just increase someone's salary. It doesn't, there's no mechanism. So it gets a little bit in the weeds, but I would say that one. There is the data on who is which rank. There's a lot of discussion right now about, promotion in the clinician ranks and what that means and how that's being defined. So there's a lot to be unpacked. There's some strong feelings that the reason the ranks look differently have to do with structure around it. And I'm sure there's some truth to it. So there's work that's being done around it. If you're interested, I would really say everybody volunteer for the committee. Again, we got 50 people, so we really had to try to figure out, with the composition, how do we do it? But it's a 1-year term, and there could be a subcommittee that's residents only. I could see that. I wanted kind of like in the movie, I wanted really data driven and outcomes oriented. One thing I would say we're doing is I have a committee looking at space and how to make the spaces more inclusive.
Thank you, Dr. Jung. One comment I wanted to make is I feel really privileged to have, to be a resident and to have the agency to be able to have these discussions in the organization who don't necessarily have the same sort of voice and standing also are kind of brought into the discussion. And, especially at this time, which has been so economically challenging with COVID, I think, so many people are just hanging on economically in such a fragile, precarious position. I just worry that some of these issues will get, not addressed as much as we're focusing on those other.
Yes, this is something that comes up a lot with our diversity and inclusion work, of course. But I also think that's why we have to have some hard discussions. We will have to set priorities because we only have so much time and energy. And I think we just have to collectively decide, what are we going to do? What are the outcomes so we can get any kind of outcome? I worry a lot about dilution because once you start thinking about one thing, there's so many other things to think about. And then you have a lot of ideas and very little implementation. So I think you need strong leadership to really say, okay, we're committing to X, and how does that look like? More minority faculty, more minority resident, retention of minority residents. How do we measure this? So what is it? How do we define minority? So just as an example, and I think it's similar to women. I waited a little bit with the women's or gender, I should say, because for exactly that reason, I felt our plates were so full this spring that I didn't want to take away from that. But I do think I realized that there's a lot of overlap in the experiences, and I think there is an ongoing need. And so I think we have to work in parallel, especially as people feel like they want to work on it in parallel. So that's why I asked, are you open to working on this, or is this something we should wait on? But I think that's something that's very important to keep checking back in. Are we making progress? Are we losing momentum? Are we getting diffuse in our approach? and what is it we're trying to do? And I think that's the discipline around the work. You know, with the Diversity Council, I keep talking about the work, and at some point somebody called me on it. It's like, Barbara, you keep talking about the work. What do you mean? And I'm like, I mean exactly this. Like, keep grounding on what are we here to do? What's our North Star? How should this look like? What do we need to do to get there? And are we doing it? And I think it's through that work. And I will also say that work needs to be done by the majority. Needs to be done by men also, by all gender, right? This work needs to be done by all ethnicities. It's not the work that can just be done by the affected group alone.
Dr. Jung, there are a couple of comments in the chat just to bring them to your attention. Alice pointed out that she would love to see the Gender Equity Council talk about how to include and promote and celebrate trans and non-binary members and counter the heteronormative and trans invisible cultural medicine. And then Kevin said, at the Madison Clinic, we have pronoun badges. Could we implement this in the whole program? And perhaps maybe even beyond that, even through the department, maybe to think about that as a possibility.
Yes. Thank you. So Alice, it was tricky. I wanted non-binary on the committee, but it was hard for me to figure out how to reach out. So this was one where that was just something where I'm learning and I'm growing, and I didn't know, you know, should I make assumptions and say, hey, I think you're this, would you want to serve? Or how do I encourage? Because we would love more non-binary people on this committee. I know of a couple, but I know there's many more I don't explicitly know about. I also don't want to put people on the spot. I don't know if people want to share their experiences, if they're already carrying that burden. So that's something, maybe we can take it offline, Alice, where I could use some help. How do I engage those groups without overburdening, without calling out? I struggled a little bit with that. So I would love some help with that.
If it's okay, Dr. Young, sorry, Lisa, the end of SCAPD for research. On behalf of some awesome residents, I also have been doing some exploring of how we identify LGBTQ plus mentors without our department. And so I know Ken and Kelly and the program leadership have been brainstorming some ideas, including putting a call out in DOM week so that we ask people who are passionate about this to come to us.
Yes.
And that's, or other advertising on that. So I'd be happy to do more.
That sounds great. And then around the pronouns, yes. So it's inconsistently used. So again, I think that would be perfect. We could have it run through the council and then just make it something that the whole department should do, because that's what we decided we want to do. I do want it to be a process. You know, things when they just come as decree, there's less engagement. And I think it's good if it comes and gets vetted and put forward.
So I have talked with a lot of the LGBTQ folks in my intern cohort. And we've also been talking about how we can increase like visibility among faculty and residents. And one of the things that struck me is that there's no I mean, we have RDC, and so maybe we could just go through them and, you know, increase LGBTQ presence in that group. But so I think that's probably the answer, but we've been looking for like groups and ways to form, especially during COVID times, like having a Rainbow Alliance or having like an ally program or like group is like a really good way to foster community.
Yes.
Because as Alice pointed out, like a lot of these identities can be like completely invisible, especially at work. And that just goes back to like code switching and everything, and whether or not you feel comfortable being out in certain settings. But one of the other things I've seen at other programs is that, you know, like if RDC has a website or something, there's people who have like out lists, and that can sound intimidating, but I personally would love to like identify myself as an LGBTQ individual. Like that's just specifically that people in the program could access. And it's basically like, if you need someone like a mentor or something, me being on this list gives you permission to send me an email or ask me a question or something.
Okay.
So, and that's like a kind of a voluntary process so that people don't feel like they have to be sort of like called out of the blue.
Yes. So I think that'd be all really helpful. I think whether it fits within RDC or not, I leave that up to you. I think there's an advantage to being very inclusive, but I think there's also, when there's lots of different stakeholders, sometimes it's hard to really meet everyone's needs. So there's no right answer. I think we just have to try different things. I do think maybe the time is to have a little bit separate groups, because I'm not sure we're fully getting to it in the current structure. In fact, I don't think we're fully getting to it in the current structure. So I think anything that can sort of be grassroots, this is how we could organize. And I think giving us as leaders lists of people who wanna be engaged. So, you know, I don't have to start making assumptions and then being uncomfortable about asking or making someone uncomfortable because I'm asking, I think would help us a lot. And so what Lisa was saying, I think really segues into that. Maybe there could be a resident piece also, Lisa, to this. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
The other thing we talked about is, of course, bystander training. So that's something the council said right away. Just do across the board bystander training so people can stand up and speak up when they see something, remove the burden from what John was saying of being the person something happens to and then having to be the one who has to address it. So that was that's a low-hanging fruit. I think that's something we really can do that will be efficient, and it crosses over to all the other things we touched on. That bystander training will not be only for gender inequalities. It'll fit every mold. So that's one thing I think that came up. I just wanted to share that although the council hasn't even met yet, I think that's one thing. Of course, they're going to look at promotion criteria, systemic, just like systemic racism, there's systemic sexism. So we'll look at that also. But the council will need feedback from all stakeholders. And you are the future. I'm always going to say that. So that's why it's so nice to meet with all of you and hear your thoughts and your energy and your engagement.
Dr. Jung, I know that you have another meeting in a few minutes. I really want to say thank you for coming and want to extend an open invitation. If you do want more FaceTime with our residents, we would love to have you back for office hours virtually if necessary. I also want to share with the group how much of an advocate you've been. I know that you meet regularly with Ken, and there are so many ways in which that silently behind the scenes you have been doing things in favor of our residents. And so please, a sincere thank you from everyone in the program.
Thank you, John, and I'll give that right back to all of you. Just call on me. One thing about COVID that has been really difficult is feeling like I can't connect the way I want to connect. So any opportunity you identify to connect, I'm all yours, and we can just have open discussions like we just had. It helps me do my job. And my job is to really represent all stakeholders of the department and make it an inclusive environment where everyone can thrive. And so I need to hear what's needed.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
For everyone else, Ken, I think maybe we'll give everyone sort of a 5-minute stretch and biology break, and just to please, I know that Ken's got a lot of ground to cover, but I think that, okay, great. So 5 minutes is okay?
5 or 10.
Let's split the difference and say 7 minutes, and we'll meet at 5 after 11.
Perfect.